I want to discuss a little bit further the responses that we've seen to Joe Biden's State of the Union address. And one of the things that I thought right after watching his address was, what will be the reaction from Fox News? Because it was undeniably a strong, compelling, powerful, well-delivered speech. And so the question is, how is this going to be spun by those who would never possibly admit that? And we talked about already in a previous segment, Sean Hannity saying he was too jacked up and he was too energetic and too passionate. I guess the particular criticism from Hannity was that Biden yelled too much. All right. And now we go to the 5. I will show you, of course, our favorite liberal Fox host, Jessica Tarlov, injecting a little bit of reason into the discussion and leaving her co-host without any refutations of what she says. But before getting to that, I want to show you a couple other Fox hosts with more ridiculous responses. But interestingly, even Janine Pi has to describe the speech as follows.
But, okay, last night he spoke, and he spoke fiercely and aggressively, but he was a cantankerous kind of combat-ready guy, okay? And it was not the right time. This is a guy who got elected because he was supposed to be the adult in the room. He was going to unify us. We have never been more divided.
So I have some thoughts on that from Janine Pi, the second half. First, you don't expect her to be describing Joe Biden as fierce and aggressive, and combat ready. But we'll get back to her saying that Joe Biden isn't doing a good enough job of uniting the country. Joe Biden's speech was so incredibly delivered last night that Jesse Waters had to say this.
Because now he's going to say, I feel my confidence, I can rise to the moment. Do those debates happen?
If they give him for the debate what they gave him last night, then yeah.
What drug do you guys think he was on?
I'm not a doctor, but they're giving him something, Jessica.
What?
Listen.
Cold medicine?
If you see a horse, and the horse is old and injured and mopes around the barnyard, and then all of a sudden you race the horse and he fires out of the gate and laps everybody, what'd they give the horse?
So he's now comparing Joe Biden to a horse lapping its competition. You just wouldn't expect to hear that on Fox News from Jesse Waters. But it shows that that's how strong the speech was. That his criticism has to be speculating about what drug was given to Joe Biden before he delivered the speech. That's Jesse Waters conceding it was a really good speech, which he doesn't want to have to concede. Now, of course, that's ridiculous. Biden just delivered a good speech. It's as simple as that. And we've seen it time and time again. His democracy speech was incredibly powerful. His last State of the Union, he did the same thing, running circles around Republicans, cornering them in multiple moments throughout the speech, and many others that we've covered. So, of course, he's not known as the most incredible orator in American history, as I've said previously today. I think he's going to be known for the efficacy of his governance and being able to make correct decisions and implement policies at a rate that we haven't seen and a magnitude that we haven't seen in decades. But yeah, he can deliver a good speech whenever it's necessary. And I think the State of the Union is one of those moments. And then we get to the voice of reason, Jessica Tarlov. Now, notice that as she's making some of these points, the Fox hosts are jumping on top of her, trying to, interrupt her here and there. But then by the time she makes the full point she's trying to make, no one has anything else to say.
They expected the speech to be an hour and a half. It was like 58 minutes because he spoke so fast you couldn't keep it. So what was your take?
It was an hour and 8 minutes, I think, was the final count. And
how does she even know that, by the way? Offhand, she knew the exact length of Biden's speech. Incredible.
I think the most important thing that happened last night refers to you saying is amped up. We're now talking about Joe Biden as too fiery, right? As too aggressive. And yesterday we were talking about Joe Biden can't find his pants. Joe Biden has dementia. Joe Biden is too old for this job. And that's how I know that it went really well, because the Republicans who have been on TV, the congressmen, senators, et cetera, people who would use the age attack are now basically saying he's an aggressive partisan who's Maybe the Coke was his. Maybe it's just Adderall.
That was my
right?
joke.
Well, you didn't tell me in the green room.
No, that's
we're
what I
like
said.
the same.
Yes.
Oh, we're good. And you also know that it went well because last night Joe Biden's campaign smashed 3 fundraising records at 9 o'clock, at 10 o'clock, and at 11 o'clock. And CNN did a poll of State of the Union watchers. 64% had a positive view of it. 62% said that Biden's policies will move the U.S. in a positive direction. And that's something that he was really struggling with. Trump was way ahead on that. That was up 17 points from before the speech began. Starting with Ukraine also surprised me. And it felt as if he probably wanted to start with talking about attacks on democracy at home. And they thought, let's contextualize this more broadly, right? To talk about democracies that are under attack and also to put Republicans on the back foot. You saw Mike Johnson, who was really struggling with his facial expressions and what do I do with my hands. He wants the money for Ukraine. The rest of his caucus is not letting him do that. So I think that's where that came from. But they clearly are paying attention to their internal polling and the conversations that Americans are having about how important the everyday bread and butter issues are. Biggest applause lines, protecting Social Security, lowering prescription drug prices.
Just if you're not a regular viewer of the 5, they are rarely this quiet. The other Fox hosts. Remarkable.
Let's give teachers a raise. Let's make sure that
We'll go through that.
Yeah, we will. Let's make sure that kids know how to read by 3rd grade. Seems really
fault
good.
for that.
But it's still, well, first of all, it's not Joe Biden that's at fault for.
Republicans refusing to properly fund education and red states suffering on that front disproportionately worse than blue states?
The kids were falling behind. Listen, I've been plenty critical of Randy Weingarten, but it's still something that Americans want, that they want our public schools to serve kids in a good way,
or to
lifting kids out of poverty. The Republicans got rid of the child tax credit. That was something that eliminated poverty by huge amounts. Those are unifying issues for the American public, and that's why it is getting so much praise.
Okay. Coming up.
Look at that. No remark, no nothing. Speechless. It's great to see. That's how strong her thoughts were there. So, first of all, I'll note that you only saw little snippets of Jesse Waters and Janine Pi, but ultimately the argument from the Fox host for the minutes that went before Jessica Tarlov's thoughts were, Biden's too angry. He was too rude. Why was he yelling? He was so good at speaking that I'm angry about it. He was so contradicting the narrative we push on this network 24/7 that I don't even know. It was so vague, vapid, and without substance. What was Jessica Tarlov's response? Let's go through the exact things that resonated with people. Let's talk about how people responded to the policy. Let's talk about how he addressed concerns around his age. Let's go through this in a substance-based way. That's what she did. That's the difference between their analysis. He was yelling, and her analysis, a very policy-centered one, and getting to the meat of what was being addressed during that speech. A very big difference. I do want to just emphasize again before we get to the topic I wanted to circle back to, that informing people on Biden's policy record, I think, is the quickest way to inspiring them to be excited about his candidacy. Because we saw it in that poll shift, the snap poll from CNN, as we already talked about a couple times during this show today. Before the speech, what do you think of Biden's policies? Are they moving the country in the right direction? And it was in the 30s. Then after the speech, 62% said bringing the country in the right direction, his policies are. That's a massive, incredible shift. And it shows you the informing people about what he's actually doing day to day. Again, his governance, not just what goes viral on social media, clip here and there of a gaffe, but his actual governance. And as Gavin Newsom said, maybe if we want to address this age conversation within the context of this topic, maybe it's thanks to his age. Maybe it's thanks to his experience in governing that we've seen the long list of achievements that I've gone over so many times in recent days and weeks. And that's something that I've been saying, right? If people only knew, his popularity would be way higher. This election would not be so close. But it's being borne out in the data a little bit here in this State of the Union address, where finally, because a lot of Americans who normally don't keep up with politics a ton are watching Biden's speech when it comes to a State of the Union address, they're noticing that, oh, I've been missing out on this whole conversation that he just delivered to me about what his administration has actually been doing. Whether it be the historic investments in green energy, in infrastructure, in lowering prescription drug costs, in expanding healthcare to veterans, in expanding the ACA, etc. Those things matter to people, as I'll say again, like his age never will. And that's something the media needs to start understanding. And that gets me to feeling like Joe Biden's going to show up like that more and more as we get to the election. I'll actually be talking about on the bonus show another speech he delivered in the wake of the State of the Union one, where he sort of reflects on it a little bit, and it's also very strong. As he gets closer to the big, climactic, important moment, he'll be delivering more of these notable, compelling speeches, and more people will tune in, as a lot of people wait till the last minute to tune in to the election and to the campaigns of the respective candidates, and they'll see the contrast. And so to those panicking about the polling, it is frightening. I hear that. But take a breath, work hard, get just your friend, whatever you can do in your life, get your friends to go out and vote. And as more people pay attention and see this Joe Biden and the Donald Trump we know, who threatens democracy, who threatens reproductive rights, who refuses to do anything about those being slaughtered at the hands of guns, who is worse for their economic well-being, who mismanaged the crisis of our lifetimes, etc. They will decide correctly, the American people, that is. That's my hope and expectation. And then finally, let's circle back to the conversation about unity. One thing you'll hear on Fox News often, as you did in an earlier clip, is that Joe Biden is not doing a good enough job of uniting us. That was one of the criticisms. Let me just, because I'm addressing this, let me go back and play this clip from Janine Pi once again so we can have the context properly before I address it.
It was not the right time. This is a guy who got elected because he was supposed to be the adult in the room. He was going to unify us. We have never been more divided. And the fact that,
So if you spend, just really think about this, every single day, your job, the reason you make millions of dollars, Janine Pi, is because you are paid to divide America. You are the network that probably divides this country more than any entity otherwise. So you're the divider-in-chief network, all right? How dare you criticize Biden for not unifying America enough when you've made it your mission to, despite whatever Joe Biden does, divide, and convince your followers that Joe Biden is the literal embodiment of Satan. You don't get to criticize about unity. You don't. And also, let me say, Biden did run on unity. And I think his platform, his policy proposals, and the way he speaks about this country is a unifying message. To a detrimental degree, he refuses to be as aggressive as I think is justified for this moment. That's how much he is dedicated to unity. But at one point in his presidency, he realized, I'm not going to be able to protect and work in the interest of the rights and well-being of Americans effectively enough if I don't at least call out the threats that are posed to their lives and rights. So yes, he calls out the threats that are posed by the MAGA extremist movement, the threat to democracy, the threat against reproductive freedoms. And that is something he should do. Whenever you have a candidate on the other side calling for the termination of the Constitution, someone who tried to block the peaceful transfer of power last time he was in power and has plans to lock up his critics in a second term, says the government should go after media outlets he doesn't like, wants to deploy the military to the streets on day one of his presidency to crush demonstrations against him. And we could just go on, as I've been breaking down for months now, the authoritarian threat that Donald Trump poses. Yes, in the interest of America staying alive, he has to call those threats out. And if that's divisive to you, because you have to spin what could be a unifying message for most of America in a way that will make it more divisive so that you can get paid and keep the ratings that you have, I don't know what Biden's supposed to do about that. And you're insane for criticizing him for not being unifying enough when, again, your job is doing the exact opposite. And let me just say, there have been many moments throughout history and many movements throughout history where the goal of unity can't be top priority. It's just true. There are lots of movements throughout history. You can think of them right now. I'm not going to name any because people would get angry. Are you comparing this to this? So I just won't do it. But picture some bad movements throughout history. Was it admirable to try to unite with them? No. Sometimes you have to win politically against certain movements for the betterment of the future and for the betterment of future unity, so that we as a country can unite around certain principles, like, I don't know, our democracy surviving. And to do that, you have to defeat politically the anti-democratic movement that is rising. So yeah, that should be the job of the president whenever his number one concern should be protecting our Constitution, democracy, and the American people at large. And Joe Biden's horrible, divisive vision for the future includes more people having healthcare, wages being higher, a more equal set of opportunities for people, less income inequality, lower prescription drug costs, a livable planet for our children and grandchildren. That, to me, is not the vision of a really divisive individual if it weren't for networks like Fox News. Whereas Trump's locking up his critics, that seems pretty divisive. Terminating the Constitution, that seems pretty divisive. Being found to have raped somebody in a civil trial, that seems pretty divisive. Trying to prevent an election from deciding the president and blocking the peaceful transfer of power seems pretty divisive. Investing in electric chargers, not so divisive. Record economic recovery, not too divisive to me. Wages increasing, stronger than they were under Trump, not too divisive. Millions of jobs, not too divisive. You want me to go on? Being for organized labor, shouldn't it be too divisive? Okay, I'll leave it there. That segment went on long. Thank you all so much for watching the show, and please become a member at lukebeasleyshow.com/membership.